From the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt, this is ATN International News. Let's take a look at the headlines. Rupert overtakes Dangote as Africa's richest person. South African rand slips ahead of domestic data releases. Trump faces revised election interference charges. First rioter to enter Capitol building sentenced to prison. 2 journalists await a verdict in their sedition trial. 9 Palestinians killed as Israel mounts operation. Judges to decide next step in probe of Telegram boss. These and more stories to come your way in a moment. Please do stay with us. And now, the details of the stories. We begin with Africa. Johan Rupert, South African billionaire and chairman of Richemont, a luxury goods conglomerate, has overtaken Aliko Dangote, chairman of Dangote Industries Limited, as Africa's richest person. According to the latest data from the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Rupert's net worth has surged to $14.3 billion, overtaking Dangote, whose fortune has declined to $13.4 billion. The data shows that Rupert's wealth has increased by $1.87 billion year to date, while Dangote's fortune has declined by $1.69 million. Nikki Oppenheimer, another South African billionaire, occupied the 3rd place with $11.3 billion net worth. Nassef Sawiris, an Egyptian businessman, followed with $9.37 billion, and Natty Kirsch, a South African investor, completed the top 5 with $9.14 billion. ATN gathered that the downturn in Dangote's net worth is largely attributed to Nigeria's challenging macroeconomic environment, where his conglomerate primarily operates. Since President Bola Tinubu assumed office in 2023 and partially removed petrol subsidy while easing currency controls to attract foreign investment, the Naira has lost its value. The Dangote Group has faced production delays and other industrial issues as its refinery compounded by steep depreciation of the Naira. The decline has significantly impacted Dangote, whose wealth is largely tied to assets dominated in Naira. Despite the challenges faced, the Dangote Group plans to generate roughly $30 billion in revenue by 2025, focusing on expanding its influence in the foreign exchange market. South African rand slipped early on Wednesday ahead of economic data release towards the end of the week. The rand was at 17.785 against the dollar by 0.744 GMT, 0.4% weaker than its previous close. The dollar index, showing its performance against a basket of currencies, was last up 0.18%. South African investors are awaiting July producer inflation data on Thursday and money supply, trade and budget balance figures on Friday for the latest indications on the health of the domestic economy. Global market focus this week will be on a preliminary estimate for U.S. gross domestic product in the 2nd quarter and the core personal consumption expenditures index, the U.S. Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure. The rand, like most emerging market currencies, tends to track international moves as well as local economic events. On markets, the top 40 Opens New Tab Index was down about 0.2%. South Africa's benchmark 2030 government bond was marginally weaker in early deals, with the yield up 0.5 basis points at 9.120%. Global stocks were poised near record highs on Wednesday, with the next move riding on results as chip-making markets darling Nvidia, while sterling hovered near a 2 to 1.5 year. United Nations World Food Programme is investigating 2 top officials in Sudan over allegations of fraud and concealing information about its ability to deliver food aid amid the country's severe hunger crisis. Also, the investigation aims to determine if World Food Programme staff hit the Army's role in obstructing aid during the 16-month war. One of those being examined in the inquiry is the World Food Programme's Deputy Country Director in Sudan, Khalid Osman, who has been given a temporary duty assignment outside Sudan. A de facto suspension, according to 6 sources. A second senior official, World Food Programme Area Manager Mohammed Ali, is being investigated in connection with the alleged disappearance of more than 200,000 liters of the United Nations Organization's fuel in the Sudanese city of Kosti, according to 4 sources. Newsmen could not confirm whether Ali remains in his role. The World Food Programme in Sudan is under urgent review of allegations of individual misconduct related to irregularities in its operations. The U.S. government's aid agency, USAID, was notified of potential fraud incident affecting World Food Programme operations in Sudan. The World Food Programme, the world's largest humanitarian organization, is battling severe hunger and is seeking $22.7 billion in funding to reach 157 million people, including 1.3 million on the brink of famine. ATN also learned that the World Food Programme is also investigating allegations that mismanagement and its Sudan office could have contributed to the failure to deliver enough aid during the conflict between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The investigation comes weeks after the Integrated Food Security Phase classification determined that famine had taken hold in at least one site in Sudan's Darfur region. Over 25 million people, or over half of Sudan's population, face crisis levels of hunger or worse. Aid workers say they have struggled to deliver relief due to logistical constraints and fighting, but also allege that army-linked authorities have hindered access by withholding travel permits and clearances. The investigation also focuses on suspicions that senior WFP staff may have misled donors by downplaying the Sudanese army's alleged role in blocking aid deliveries to areas controlled by the RSF. The war in Sudan, which began in April 2023, has caused over 10 million people to flee their homes, leading to the world's largest internal displacement crisis. The conflict has worsened hunger, acute malnutrition, and disease outbreaks. The United States and rights groups accuse both sides of war crimes, which the combatants deny. UN agencies operate out of Port Sudan, where the army-aligned government relocated after losing control of most of Khartoum. Aid agencies have largely provided publicly blaming either party. Oil prices fell 2% on Tuesday, ending a 3-day streak of gains. Concerns over supply losses from the Middle East and North Africa and global fuel demand worries led to Brent crude futures up 8 cents and U.S. West Texas immediate crude futures up 7 cents. While a decline in U.S. oil and fuel inventories last week supported prices, the potential loss of Libyan oil output and a possible expansion of the Israel-Gaza conflicts to include Iranian-backed militants from Hezbollah in Lebanon, remaining the largest risk to oil markets. Geopolitical risks continue to hover over the market. Analysts had said in a note on Wednesday. ATN also gathered that several oil fields across Libya have halted output as closures spread, amid a dispute between rival government factions over control of the central bank and oil revenue. The dispute puts about 1.2 million barrels per day of production at risk, according to reports. There has still been no confirmation of any closures from the Tripoli-based government or from the National Oil Corps, which is in charge of oil resources. However, engineers at the southeastern Amal and Nafura oil fields told newsmen that production had been halted, while engineers at Abu Atifel, also in the east, said output was reduced in the Middle East. Fighting continued in the Gaza Strip between Israel and Hamas militants, displacing Palestinians, while there were few signs of a concrete breakthrough in ceasefire talks in Cairo. Over the weekend, Israel and Hezbollah bombarded each other with rockets and missiles across the Lebanese border. Later on Wednesday, weekly U.S. oil storage data is due from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The discovery of increased crude oil reserves in Namibia has sparked interest in Namibian assets, with an index fund tracking local government bonds set for its biggest annual jump on record. The fund has jumped over 20% in U.S. dollar terms since the discovery of at least 10 billion barrels of oil in the Mopane field. Yields on local sovereign bonds have dropped further following the discovery. Namibian government bonds are still paper set, prompting foreign investors to consider the ETF for increased exposure to the resource-rich country, despite not yet producing oil gas. The local equities index in Namibia has gained over 19% year-to-date in U.S. dollar terms, while the Namibian dollar has strengthened 4.5% against the greenback this year. The country's economic potential is expected to be a focus after a presidential election due at the end of the year. Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwah, the ruling left energy could eventually overtake mining in terms of significance to the middle-income country's economy. Charlie Robertson, head of macro strategy, said all exports per capita out of Namibia will look like a Gulf estate in the 2040s, provided they are competitive globally, which should be a positive for debt to GDP ratios in the country partners. In South America, a similar oil boom in Guyana has been key to its economic growth that is expected to increase by 34.3% in 2024. Its fifth straight year of GDP growth above 20%. U.S. prosecutors have revised charges against former President Donald Trump for alleged election interference, following a Supreme Court's ruling that presidents enjoy immunity from criminal prosecution. The revised Trump denies allegation interference and claims widespread voter fraud. The revised indictment brought by Department of Justice Special Counsel Jack Smith leaves in place the 4 crimes Trump is accused of committing: conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, attempting to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Trump has previously pleaded not guilty to all charges. Former President Trump has been indicted for allegedly attempting to resurrect a death witch hunt and distract the American people from the election. The new indictment, which was slimmed down from 45 to 36 pages, reworks the language of the allegations and refutes the claims that Trump tried to pressure Justice Department officials to work to overturn his defeat. The special counsel's office explained its reasoning in a statement stating that the superseding indictment had been presented to a no grand jury. ATN gathered that a new indictment against Donald Trump argues that he acted as a private citizen, not as president, when he undertook the alleged scheme to sway the election. The indictment argues that Trump had no official responsibilities related to the certification proceeding, but had a personal interest in being named the winner of the election. The new indictment also removes charges against Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official who played a key role in the fake elector scheme. The new indictment leaves several key allegations against Trump, including attempting to persuade Vice President Mike Pence to obstruct Biden's election certification. The U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on Trump's presidential immunity framework remains unclear, with the new indictment suggesting that his case would still proceed. However, it would not necessarily expedite the case, as it is vague about what private conduct by a president can be charged with. Trump's legal team is requesting more time to prepare for the case, which came together after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Smith to oversee 2 federal investigations into Trump. If Trump defeats Kamala Harris, he is expected to order the Justice Department to drop all federal charges. Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic ticket for U.S. President, have agreed to their first joint interview. The 2 politicians will sit down with CNN in Georgia for an interview that airs on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The Harris-Walz campaign is set to conduct its first in-depth interview with a reporter since President Joe Biden endorsed Ms. Harris as his replacement. The interview follows their high-profile speeches at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago and a bus tour of Georgia. It will be the first opportunity for voters to hear more detail about the campaign's policy positions before Election Day, which is 70 days away. Republicans and media have criticized Vice President Hillary Clinton's campaign for its few concrete policy positions and interviews, leading to chiding remarks and insults from her opponents. Trump criticized her for being barely incompetent, and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance criticized her for press avoidance. Both Trump and Vance have held multiple interviews and press conferences, often facing hostile questions. Harris, who has enjoyed a positive campaign, has avoided some of the gaffes and blunders that the Republican ticket has faced in front of the press. It remains to be seen what effect this interview may have on Ms. Harris' campaign, as multiple national opinion polls show her leading Trump ahead of the November presidential election. A Farley Dickinson University poll released last week suggests Ms. Harris is beating Trump nationally by 7 points, 50% to 43%. It is a stark reversal of fortunes for Democrats, who were beginning to fall behind Republicans in multiple races when Mr. Biden was a nominee. Polls frequently indicated the president trailing his predecessor by several points as well. Michael Sparks, the first rioter, and prosecutes more participants. On Monday, Utah man was arrested and charged with obstructing law enforcement, a felony, and a range of misdemeanor charges. Hal Ray Huddleston, 66 years old, is accused of fighting with police and using a flagpole to push against police lines. Nearly 1,500 people have been charged in connection with the riot. Nearly 900 have pleaded guilty to various crimes, and more than 180 have been convicted at trial, according to the latest U.S. Justice Department figures released earlier this month. Trump has promised to pardon some or all of the rioters, whom he has called hostages and political prisoners, but has not given details about who he would release or the criteria he would use. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We'll be back after this short break. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to the broadcast of the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts, placements, bookings, and commercials. And you can connect with us and watch us on our ATN socials. On Facebook and YouTube is Atlantic Television, and TikTok Atlantic Network 1, X, formerly Twitter, Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. Pope Francis will visit East Timor, the country's newest country, for the first time since 2002. The visit follows the Vatican's acknowledgement of the sexual abuse of Bishop Carlos Bello and a molesting of American missionary. Despite allegations, the Catholic people of East Timor downplay or dismissed these allegations, according to reports. Pope Francis' upcoming visit to Mozambique could mark a significant moment for his papacy if he addresses the allegations against former church head Carlos Bello, who retired in 2002 due to health issues. Bello was sent to Mozambique to work as a missionary priest, where allegations against him became public in 2022. The Vatican confirmed Bello's secret sanction 2 years earlier. Rumors had been building against the priest, and by the time the report was published, he had already confessed in a letter to church authorities to abusing young girls from at least 1991 to 2012. The Vatican defrocked 87-year-old Pope Francis and charged him in East Timor, where he is currently serving 12 years in prison. Pope Francis won the Nobel Peace Prize for his bravery in drawing international attention to Indonesian human rights abuses during the conflict. The Norwegian Nobel Committee praised his courage and smuggling witnesses to testify to the United Nations Human Rights Commission to Indonesia's military occupation and support for assistance is respected. Victims of abuse in Timorese churches face fear of being labeled anti-church, and support from society remains strong. Despite Prime Minister Xana Gusmao visiting the ex-president in prison, there is no word on Pope Francis' plans to meet with victims or address the sex abuse directly. Lingsma, a Timorese Catholic, believes it would be meaningful for him to apologize to the victims and others who have not yet been publicly exposed. Bishop Francis could transform the situation of clergy sex abuse victims in East Timor by becoming their champion and addressing hidden victims directly. This could be a landmark moment for his papacy, and as it could save lives and impacts the lives of hundreds of thousands of clergy sex abuse victims in Asia and Africa. However, Timorese historian Luciano Valentin de Calciascio suggests that clergymen's role in East Timor's independence should not be discounted. The case, Hong Kong's first since 1997, charges them with conspiracy to publish seditious materials under a colonial-era law. Stand News was one of the last remaining openly critical media outlets in Hong Kong. Stand News, a Hong Kong-based media outlet, gained prominence during the 2019 anti-government protest for its critical reporting. However, in 2021, Hong Kong faced a shutdown of civil society groups due to a Beijing-imposed national security law. Apple Daily's top management was arrested and assets frozen, forcing Stand News to close down. The founder, Jimmy Lai, is currently fighting collusion charges. Only Chung and Lan were later charged in connection to Stand News. Hong Kong's press scene has been severely impacted by the closures of Apple Daily, Stand News and Citizen News. The closures were seen as a result of a political crackdown on civil society, with activists often prosecuted or forced into self-exile. The Hong Kong government has enacted a new security law which critics fear could further restrict civil liberties. The verdict for the editors has been delayed multiple times. Hong Kong's mini-constitution guarantees freedoms, but they may be restricted by law. The sedition law prohibits seditious publications and aims to incite hatred or contempt against the Chinese central government, Hong Kong government, or judiciary. Prosecutors accused Chung and Lam of conspiring to publish seditious articles using Stand News as a political platform. Stand News has been charged with promoting illegal ideologies and smearing security law and law enforcement officers. The defendants, Chung and Lam, have pleaded not guilty and are facing up to 2 years in prison and a fine of 5,000 Hong Kong dollars for a first offense. The trial, which began in October 2022, has been extended to 50 days. Typhoon moving at bicycle speed began dumping rain on southern Japan on a path that will bring strong winds. High waves and significant rainfall to most of the country, prompting weather officials to issue the highest level warnings on Wednesday. 3 people were injured and 3 others were missing due to a storm-related landslide and driving accident. The Japan Meteorological Agency said Typhoon Shanshan is expected to reach southern Kyushu and possibly make landfall. And on Thursday, they issued that the highest level warning for violent winds, high waves and heavy rain for the Kagoshima prefecture, as well as an emergency storm surge warning. It's forecast up to 60 centimeters of rainfall in 24 hours for southern Kyushu. Shanshan was about 120 kilometers south of the southern island of Yakushima on Wednesday morning as it headed, peaking winds up to 180 kilometers per hour, according to the agency. The warm, humid air around the typhoon and a separate high-pressure system caused heavy rain in the central Japanese city of Gamagori, where a landslide buried a house with 5 people inside. 2 of them were rescued alive and workers were searching for the other 3, according to the Disaster Management Agency. Weather and government officials are concerned about extensive damage across the nation as the typhoon slowly sweeps up the Japanese archipelago over the next few days, threatening floods and landslides and paralyzing transportation, businesses and other daily activity. Disaster Management Minister Yoshifumi Misumura, at a task force meeting on Wednesday, said the typhoon could cause unprecedented levels of violent winds, high waves, storm surges and heavy rain. Residents in Shanshan's predicted path to take precautionary measures early, such as by checking their nearest shelters to save their own lives. Masumura urged residents, especially older adults, not to hesitate and take shelter whenever there is any safety concern. The government also cancelled its annual earthquake drills on Sunday. Response resources. Dozens of domestic flights connecting southwestern cities and island will be cancelled through on Friday. Japan Railway Company said most trains and local train services were operating normally on Wednesday. Many on Kyushu would be suspended on Thursday. Similar steps may be taken on the main island of Honshu through on Sunday. Postal and delivery services have been also suspended in the Kyushu region, and supermarkets and other stores announced plans to close early. At least 9 Palestinians. The latest round of Israeli-Palestinian violence began on October 7 after Hamas militants stormed into southern Israel, killing 1,200 and taking more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli figures. Israel's Gaza campaign has since leveled swaths of the enclave, displaced nearly all its 2% multiple times, giving rise to deadly hunger and disease, and killed more than 40,500 people, Palestinian health officials say. Internationally, mediated talks to end the conflict continue, with Hamas and Israel trading blame for a lack of progress, and the United States expressing optimism that a ceasefire can be reached. Federal Infrastructure Minister Catherine King is pushing to reduce the Commonwealth's transport funding share. Despite state and territory, she seeks to dilute the Commonwealth's road and railway formula from 80:20 to ratio 50:50. However, NSW and Victoria are opposing these changes. NSW Tasmania, the NT and WA have not yet signed up for the 5-year road and rail funding, which replaced the Morrison government's 2019 agreement. WA Deputy President Rita Safioti is negotiating with Ms. King to secure funding on a case-by-case basis. The shift from 80:20 to 50:50 would cost states millions of dollars. The federal funding agreement published by Ms. King has been criticized for cost shifting to larger states, leading to increased funding for road projects. Opposition infrastructure spokeswoman Bridget McKenzie accused the government of misleading Parliament and misleading Parliament. Tasmania Treasurer Michael Ferguson has praised federal Labour's recent backdown on its unacceptable approach to funding roads and bridges in Tasmania and Australia. He praised territory treasurers and infrastructure ministers for their effort in resolving the issue, removing a clause that would have imposed a fee arrangement. Mr. Ferguson said that would have meant, a judicial source said on Wednesday. Lynch people were killed when the British flagged Bayesian, a 56-meter-long yacht, capsized, were sput mini force and shares over the next 6 months, with the aim of completing the deal early next year, according to Grove's detention as he landed at an airport near Paris on a private jet on Saturday evening has put the spotlight on the criminal liability of app providers and fueled debate on where expected he can be detained before the